Welcome to the Juan on Juan podcast with your host, Juan Ayala. Prepare to have your mind blown.
And welcome to a SWAPCAST. What's up, Randy?
Hey, how's it going, Juan?
Doing all right, brother. Make sure to follow me. My name's Juan. I'm from the Juan on Juan podcast. It'll be a SWAPCAST. So for the listeners on Randy's RSS feed, my name's Juan from the Juan on Juan podcast. I run a crazy conspiracy cuckoo woo-woo podcast, and you can find me on social media at the Juan on Juan podcast anywhere. Patreon.com/the Juan on Juan podcast for exclusive content. And Randy, can you plug your stuff so my listeners
Absolutely.
can check you out?
I'm Randy from the Red Thread podcast. You can find me in most podcast outlets. Also over there on Odyssey at Red Thread Podcast. Got a few things up there. And Random Fracks on Instagram. So go take a look. If you're following Juan, you may very well run into me as his follower. So that's always awesome. But yeah, man, I'm stoked to be here. Glad to be talking with you this fine evening.
You mentioned some stuff, bro, that got me intrigued already before we started recording. You said the moon is made of plasma. What are you talking about, bro?
Oh, you ever heard of Crow 777?
No.
I mean,
is that a band?
Okay. No, it's a podcaster much like us. He does his own research, and he spends a lot of his time filming the sun and
Crow
the moon.
No,
Right.
I'm thinking about somebody else.
No, this guy, I mean, he filmed an effect, right? A visual effect that he captured on video. And if you go look at his work, you can see this thing. It's called the lunar wave. And have you ever videotaped a computer screen or usually an older TV, and you see that rolling kind of line kind of roll down the screen as you're filming it? So he's filming the moon, and essentially the same effect happens. So the story goes, he essentially puts that information out, and in his mind, he mistakenly called it a hologram, right? Because that lends a lot of credibility to simulation theory if you're throwing around words like hologram. So since then, he's cleared that up and just said there's some form of an effect. You know, he's not 100% sure what it is. He just filmed the thing. And since then, more and more people have captured this effect, this kind of resetting of the optical disk of the moon. And it's weird because it happens so regularly. If you capture it once, you may very well capture it twice. And it's just so reminiscent of like when you take out your camera and you're filming your TV and you get a weird kind of effect. So that just, to me, what that signifies or speaks to is, okay, so there's maybe a projected illusion, something going on here that isn't just the solid face of the moon, right? And if it is just the solid face of the moon, what is in front of it that's moving, you know, to cause this optical effect? So these are some thought processes, you know, I worked through a little bit, and like my conclusion with putting everything together, man, I got to be upfront. I'm down with every conspiracy theory, with every esoteric kind of school of thought, right? And so in looking into all sorts of different things, you know, NASA is a lie, you know, Freemasons, I mean, across the board, all the way to Cymatics star theory, which is interesting in itself. Maybe we can get into that in a minute. But as far as the moon being a plasma effect, back in the, it was right before they went to the moon on ABC or NBC, one of these national news companies, we have an interview that's broadcast of a doctor or, you know, a scientist. We'll just say a scientist for this, for purposes here. They interviewed a scientist, and he was talking about, well, how can man land on the moon when the moon is a plasma effect? So this could either be a psyop to persuade us that, you know, there's nothing going on, it's just a plasma effect, or B, this is what I find weird. This is the one clip of this interview that they allowed to get out disclosing the truth, which if you're into conspiracies, you know about the like karmic balance way that they portray everything that they're going to do or have done to you, but just stamp a thing on it and call it fiction, or, you know, stamp a thing on it and call it a conspiracy theory, right? Just labels.
Yeah.
That's the go-to.
Created by the CIA.
Right. It makes sense. Look at psychology, right? They've got it down. You know what I mean? They really do. Look at the mass manipulation going on. They've got us on lock. No matter how, awake or woke or whatever we like to think we are, dude, we're just playing the game that they built the structure for. That's it. We're still just players. You know what I mean? And, but anyway, so I start looking at these effects in the moon, and I'm like, well, that's interesting, you know? And I was like, what if he's the only guy that caught it? And then another guy caught it on film, and then another guy. And I start listening more and more to, different podcasts, trying to find out what's going on. Start listening about Inner Earth, Agartha. Start finding out about things like the world trees, that may very well have been cut down and became these mesas, these, buttes. And so, I mean, this is all wild, all over the place stuff that just fits way outside of the box of thought that we're all taught to kind of think in. We're all taught to not daydream and focus on our work. And they tell us think outside the box, but meanwhile, you better have the answers for what's in the box. You know what I mean? So it's kind of this thing. And we all went through it, going to school. We've all been sufficiently programmed to, be a cog in the wheel of this giant world system that we're all in, whether we want to admit it or not, we are in. So I was like, okay, is this the lie that they're telling that they allowed to get out accidentally? Or is this the small truth that they put out there in such a weird way, making the scientists look nuts, especially when they came out a few years later and actually went there? I put air quotes, right? They actually went there
when they launched that satellite and the moon rang. Did you hear about that one? And I believe it was in the 60s.
There's
or 70s?
so much to it, and it's like, all right, well, what's an illusion? You know what I mean? Is this optical effect, rolling over the moon, the illusion? Is the story about going there the illusion, landing on something that may very well be a projection or hologram? Or is there like so much more to it that we're getting all these weird little pieces? So I put that together in my own head and kind of came to a strange conclusion. And that's, what if it's all of the above to some extent, right? Like, what if it involves so much more that we're not seeing? Things like, and this is where I go off the deep end, right? Things like stargates, right? Resonant frequency.
Well, you're
kind
not
of
off
gateways.
the deep end, bro, because we know 100% that, number one, there's a reason why we haven't gone back, number one. And number two, shout out to Freemasons. One of my co-hosts is actually a Freemason, and good friend. So nothing against Freemasons. And when we throw this shit around,
not at all. It's just part of esoteric, it's part of things that if you're not in that group, you don't understand. And that's kind of applies to every science and every school of thought has its insiders.
Yeah. It's
what I mean?
Disciples, if you will.
Right. And unfortunately, they're all kind of, and we are all kind of taught to basically not intercommunicate with other schools of thought. There's a lot of duality. I mean, polarity is kind of a part of this world. Honestly, it's what makes it so fun sometimes, just to have the ability to talk crap on somebody else. Imagine if you didn't have that in your life at all.
Yeah.
How many laughing, joking, enjoyable times have you had with a buddy where you're like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah about this group.
Well, that's one of the things
person,
that
right?
defines us from, the reptilians. I keep getting this question a lot, like, oh, do you really think there's reptilians? Yeah, I think that there might be some sort of reptilian being that is interdimensional or something, but I also talk about it in a metaphorical sense of the word, where it's these archontic forces that are at work in our daily lives that are trying to hold us back.
Yes. Yeah, the archontic, man, I like that. That's a perfect way to say that. Or oh man,
I'm writing a book, bro. It's called Deciphering the Archontic Matrix. So that's where
that's stellar. I lost. So I'd imagine that you've dug into David Icke's work and gone down that set of rabbit holes. So yes, you're familiar with, and a lot of our listeners are familiar with the thought process of higher dimensions, higher vibrations, different.
Randy,
I like to look at it.
Let's get
like
back to the
octaves.
Stargates, bro.
Yeah, let's do that. So imagine
Shit
if they couldn't
fascinates me,
fly.
bro.
Imagine if they couldn't fly to the moon, right? If there's this barrier, this Van Allen belt, this whatever the hell, firmament, right? You want to call it. So if we're in our bubble, right? What if there is a way to reach one of these other bubbles, which we see as lights in the sky, whether the moon, the sun, there's reference out there to the sun being some kind of portal that's suggestive that you can travel through it. So, and if we believe the sun is a star and can also believe the sun is a portal, why couldn't stars also be portals? In a sense, I say in a sense because just because we see something, I think it's a kind of a shout out to the resonant frequency of wherever that actually is. And it's a different way to look at each star and, each celestial body differently. Like you can't physically get there by flying a rocket up and landing on the thing. But because it's
to add on to that, right? You said that the sun is might be a portal to another dimension. Johannes Kepler, which is the person who is most notable for coming up with the idea that the planets orbit in an elliptical, right? Johannes Kepler, and he worked with.
Right.
He also quoted Pythagoras's Music of the Spheres. You have the Gnostics thinking that every single orbit is a different dimension. Johannes Kepler believed that there were beings that were living on, these light beings that were living on the sun. So you have somebody who has contributed from the ancient times, from the year 1400 or 1700.
Of the mainstream, nonetheless.
Of the mainstream, who were mystics, who were known mystics, right? The Leibniz that created binary code, Charles Babbage that created the modern day computer, all these guys that helped contribute to the mainstream beliefs were mystics, either Rosicrucians, either Freemasons, either whatever they were. They were part of these secret societies who talked
Manly
about
P.
this.
Hall, hardcore mystic, right? Spells it out for us. It's mind-blowing, and I'm glad that you bring that up because not that long ago we were kind of at an impasse as conspiracy theorists of not being able to tie a whole lot back to the mainstream, okay, but more and more finding out, like you're saying about Kepler, suggesting that there is something beyond this realm and there's something to this kind of higher dimensionality.
Look at Isaac Newton. Look at René Descartes. The notable names in society, right? Isaac Newton talked about, he criticized the Cartesian mechanistic universe theory that René Descartes came up with, mind you, who made the Cartesian coordinate system, which we all use today for everything in geometry, analytical geometry, algebra, calculus, whatever you name it. This is the guy who created that system that we use, who was a mystic. He was a mystic. They were obsessed with being able to turn their ideas into the Platonic solids for some fucking reason. I don't know why, but that's what they were all about. Now, you have Isaac Newton, who came back, and René Descartes had the dualism, right? The dual mind and body theory, which he understood that the body was one vessel, the mind and consciousness was another. Isaac Newton came out and was trying to battle his mechanistic universe theory, which states that matter and everything that we see is matter rubbing up against each other. So everything is a cog, everything is a wheel. And Isaac Newton said, no, it's not. What it actually is, and this is quoted by him in his work, unintelligible, unforeseen forces that are at work. What does that mean? It's like you're not helping the cause, bro. You're only like, what are you saying? Like, what are you saying, bro? And this is what he said that he Isaac Newton, he was, right. Again, another mystic, and other people who are in these secret societies who understood the fabric of reality way better than the regular layman person.
No doubt. And do you think that perhaps somebody like Isaac Newton, his role may have been to kind of bridge this gap, right? Because there's a set of people that don't believe, don't feel, don't think that the unseen realms even exist, right? So to kind of dumb it down and then come out with the theory of gravity for these people, for these masses, yes. Right? You have to have something, some name school to the of face. Thought for the masses. Mm-hmm. You have to. The people that are not in touch with anything energetic, right? Because think about it this way. We are at the tail end of a cycle of time called the yugas, right? We're at the tail end of one that's very material, very dense, okay? And we're kind of coming back into an energetic one right about the time Einstein comes out with the theory of relativity, is right when this transition happened from the Kali Yuga into the Dwapara Yuga, where we are now, right? This is based on, Vedic texts and things like this. So you have this group of people coming out of this last epoch, or this last very material age, right? But may very well have been actually the entire time humanity's dark age, the last 4,000 years. So coming out of that and coming into this energetic understanding, right? This would have been a couple or few hundred years prior to Einstein. You had Kepler, you had, all of these guys, these famous Italian physicists, mathematicians, and they would most likely, if they're any kind of mystic, be able to understand that the energies are changing. They're going into a spot where, okay, we're going to have chaos.
Second law of thermodynamics, though, right? Is it the first law where energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed, or is that the second one?
Well, I know it's definitely in Einstein's theory of relativity, because he says energy equals matter, and vice versa. So, yeah, I'm not 100% on all the laws. I haven't schooled myself on all that. But as far as the trains of thought, yeah, no worries. As far as the trains of thought involved in kind of translating this information, like we were saying, you have somebody like Isaac Newton that's like, okay, we've got all these masses, right? How are we going to school them enough that they can function in this realm? But also, being that he was most likely kind of part of the club, right, of builders of Freemasonry, or for lack of a better phrase. I understand that there are folks out there that don't tie into the occult side of what's known as Freemasonry, and that's cool too. But anyway, so you have to have schools of thought for everybody, which is what you kind of see if you look at the secret teachings of the ages. You see these very secular, smaller groupings of thought popping up as time goes on to kind of spread people out, essentially, to not give any one person any of all the keys to the kingdom. So you got to keep it kind of spread around, and then you're going to have people step up in clout, right? In clout in this world.
Gatekeepers.
Right, that are kind of actively managing so many schools of thought within themselves that they see the big picture and can work out ways to help these, and they always will think that they're helping the people below them, because they are coming up with these processes to make all of our lives, right? Like the process of the social security, like everything, as much crap as we talk on the system around us, think about this machine that's around us, this social construct, right? And the effort behind planning this out, setting it up, right? And so that leads us to a point where, okay, now there are folks like I consider myself that are outside any of these schools of thought, but are piecing together what they can based on the information available through the internet, which, at first I was like, oh, the internet's just a surveillance tool, right? It's just all this, doom and gloom kind of stuff. But then you look at it like, okay, well, this allows me the ability to surf the Library of Congress from home.
It's a Stargate, Randy.
The
internet is a Stargate into other.
It's a dimensional loop. Yeah, there's no way you and I can talk to each other real time unless it's through another dimension.
100%.
It's quantum computing.
And what you touched on earlier in the podcast, where you said that there's different ideas and they're all sort of the same thing. I was actually having a conversation with Chris from Mensa Podcast about this yesterday. He's like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about this? And I go, well, dude, I think they all have some sort of idea which is the same, just reinterpreted differently and reiterated differently every single time. So I think we're all right in this whole scheme of things. Absolutely. But what I can't get behind is how you said this elaborate system, the banking system, which we know was created through alchemical processes. You have the educational system, again, created by these elites who are in these higher societies. You have hierarchy, which was, again, it's a system of dissimilarities which are illusional and illusionary, which lead to corruption and greed and ignorance, right? You have the governmental system as well, which we know people such as Plato talked about it, and they want certain utopias. You have Francis Bacon talking about it in the New Atlantis. You have these different ideas, but they all came together. The founding fathers, who were mystics as well, and who had also a paranormal experience within the signing of the Declaration of Independence, are the people who paved the way for the system that we have today, this democracy, quote unquote, that we have today. And from that sprouted what we know the United States to be. Now, what I can't get behind is, right, we have all these ideas floating around. We have all these crazy conspiracies just being thrown around. How you said it's an elaborate system. So why hasn't anybody, and not saying that nobody has, really blown the lid on this shit, Randy? Like that's what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, first of all, you have the way that it's built, and you have the power of it, really. These people that are in these higher positions, these are modern day wizards, man. Mm-hmm. These are modern. They are more than just, just the hierarchy. These people are engaging in so many different levels of persuasion, right? Of magic, really. I mean, when you really break it down, I mean, the way that people are manipulated into believing that everything is, beautiful and peachy as long as they can go to Walmart and buy a pizza or whatever, right? Like, so, I mean, it's genius. It's so far beyond, unfortunately, most people, I think, partially due to the fact that we're all poisoned from the time we're born. Mm-hmm. We're all dumbed down, poisoned. I mean, if you stop drinking the tap water, you might be able to think a little clearer, and things like this. So there's a lot going on, which is why I think that it is an intricate and very kind of complex system, right? I don't know that any one hand or one finger knows what any of the other fingers are doing. Compartmentalization is definitely key in why nobody's blown the lid off of this. If somebody blows the lid off of a small part, right?
Well, I mean, I said that, but also you have people such as Helena Blavatsky and unfortunately people like Aleister Crowley, which I think really paved the way regardless. And I was talking to Mark about this today. I said, dude, Aleister Crowley, he did what he did. He blew the lid on a lot of things that we know to be today that's occult. Without him, we wouldn't have a lot of things that we have today. It's like an example being the translations of Eliphas Levi that he translated himself. And also a lot of different magical practices that Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, all these elites practiced. But I just can't. I want to like Crowley. I really do. But when you read about the shit that he did and what he was doing right on Loch Ness and all this, it is just vile. It is just dirty and nasty what he was doing to
different
people.
Level type dark shit.
Yeah,
for
bro,
sure.
You know what I mean?
But the thoughts that he had, right? And this is the kind of crazy part about all this is the thought processes that he had were so profound that look at where they got today. Look at all the people practicing based on his work, right? And look at what even if it's all for the detriment of humanity, look at the effectiveness of what he put across to people. Mm-hmm. So that you can look at it like manipulation, or you can look at it like I prefer to as magic, right? You are essentially conjuring others' beliefs in order to influence your own. You know what I mean? Like you are casting spells, man. Mm-hmm. And he was all about that. And he was obviously very skilled at it, or he wouldn't be the person that we recall. I mean, you ask a regular person out on the streets, most people know who Aleister Crowley is or was. And most people don't know how his work affected NASA and JPL and any of these other things, though, which is like kind of crazily going back to the moon thing, which makes you really wonder about the thought process that we all have built in through our programming, that we A, went to the moon, B, landed there, and 3, brought people back, right? Like all of these things we are taught from a very young age, kind of not even suggested,
the pyramids
very
are
deliberately.
Tombs. The pyramids are tombs for pharaohs. Yeah, 100%. Like all this shit that they talk about. Yeah,
the world is a sphere, right, of a certain circumference.
Hey, Randy, are you a flat earther, bro?
You know what? Here's where I sit with that, and I'm pretty proud.
It's a yes or no question, Randy.
Not really. Not when you realize that it takes you observing something for it to become real. So if you're based on, the double slit experiment observer effect, mm-hmm. right? So if I'm not there looking out at the ocean to see that ship like come and go across the horizon, and then all that shit doesn't exist. So if I see things as flat because that's how my perspective has to see it, then that's because I'm essentially manifesting it by looking at it. So it's not as simple as I think shape is kind of stupid thing to argue about, to be honest with you, because I do think that if you say you popped outside of time real quick, now stepped out of the dimension for a second, you might very well be looking at a spherical bubble of time that encompasses everything that is this realm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know how the higher dimensions look because you wouldn't have eyes like we do. You would have your third eye wide open looking at things in a completely different dimension. So you could probably, pick the thing up and spin it around and look wherever you wanted to focus your intention in that realm in that time and see it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't necessarily even be, an opaque sphere that is solid, but I'm just thinking of it as a bubble in time. So I think that's part of where the thought process for it being a sphere maybe comes from. Some of these higher kind of experiences that maybe people have had with or without the help of hallucinogens. So that's where I'm at on the flat earth.
That's trippy as fuck too, though, right? When you take this substance and it makes you see things that you wouldn't normally see. So what else are you not seeing all the time? Like I tell people, the eye can only pick up 0.0035 of the light spectrum. What
Right.
about all the other light spectrum, ultraviolet, X-rays, all these things that we don't
all
see?
of your senses are dumbed down, right? Like your hearing, right? You only hear this certain bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs can hear higher, lower. Other creatures can hear higher, lower, see higher, lower. Bugs have, multifaceted vision. They can see UV rays differently and all of this stuff. So that makes it kind of hard for me to understand why it's a far cry to think that some people can attune their minds, which is a giant, receiver grill up here, just like waiting for energy to course in, right, from the world. This is how we interpret things. It's not just our internal process, but it's also a receiver of galactic energies, of things we don't understand, apparently. But that being said, it's not a far cry for me to say there are other dimensions, right? There's got to be something behind what we see, touch, and feel. Science has only outlined, from spectrum of high ultraviolet X-ray light or microwave, whichever's up here. I think it's microwave, all the way down to infrared, right? That's all we can observe. But this is one octave, right? If you're familiar with music at all, you understand what, a tone, a key, and the octaves are.
Yeah, Pythagoras was the one that came up with that.
So, and I mean, due to the fact that it's like integrated with mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also lumped in with music or sound, applies to light also. I mean, these are all different fractal essences of the same thing, and there are others. We just are not tuned to them. We have no way of figuring out how to tune into them. We're lucky enough to tune into X-rays via certain materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And certain, projection of certain beams and things. So kind of going back to the moon, you look at the moon and it resembles a kind of an X-ray. It's very gray and very white. It's kind of an interesting, contrast to it all. And you go to the doctor and you break your wrist and you look at the X-ray and there's shades of gray and white and they're all inverse.
And now that you come to think of it, that honestly, you're blowing my mind right now because I didn't really think about that, but it's really the only sort of color that, right, like H.P. Lovecraft's color out of space. It's like its own shade of color that you really don't see anywhere else but on the moon, if you really come to think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And so let's just say that there's other rays beyond X-ray, right, that we can't see. We can't even understand that they're there. These rays that they pick up with these buried sensor arrays in the mountains, right? They go into a mountain, drill a hole all the way down, and they drop a sensor in there to catch the photons that are supposedly coming from through the Earth from the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what if they're coming from, yes, beneath our Earth, but what if on this next octave, right? This next octave of existence, right? You kind of go down an octave and you wind up in what's also been known as Agartha, or, you know what I mean, inner Earth. Inner to us, but to them, we're in heaven, right? We're upper class, right? So although I think that in most cases it's probably thought that in Agartha, everything's much better than up here.
You touched on earlier about these. You said that there was this interview that you saw, right, from the 50s or 60s, something like that, at the beginning.
Yeah, it was in the late 60s, I think, mid to late 60s, and it was on national news.
One of the interviews that I haven't been able to find was with Admiral Byrd, right? Speaking of Hollow Earth, because it's one of my favorite conspiracy theories. There's an interview that he did where he's warning people of our real threat is these crafts that can move quickly from the North Pole to the South Pole at fast rates, right? That's going to be our threat. And I try to look back at that. I try to find that same interview back then, and I can't find it anymore. Not on YouTube. I haven't looked anywhere else, but I looked on YouTube because I had seen it before on there. But now you go back, and it's not there, right? And Admiral Byrd being a very decorated...
but if you look at YouTube, it's flooded with like the propaganda films from when they went on that expedition. Like, oh, well, now here are the soldiers with their dog and their, you know what I mean? Their sled dogs learning how to sled, you know, those old black and white propaganda military films. You could find those, no problem. You know what I mean? So there's been a saturation of a certain type of information based on that subject, and a, disillusion of the rest. Pushed aside, it's probably on Odyssey or BitChute or something, but that's kind of a pain to dig through all those different channels.
You're talking about propaganda, right? And interestingly enough, I'm working on an episode right now. Did you know that Dr. Seuss worked on propaganda cartoons, and the cartoons that he used in those propagandas, right, where they have the swastika and all this stuff, and when they were putting the Japanese, I believe, in these camps, he did
kind of demonizing them.
Yeah, he did pieces of and some racist pieces as well, because again, he was a product of his time, but the same art that he used for that, he used for the kids' art that we see in these Dr. Seuss books. And I bring that up because there is I forgot which story it is, but one of his more well-known ones, where when you look at his art, it's very psychedelic. It's very alien-esque. It's very Lovecraftian, where it's like this shape that was obtuse, but behaving like an acute, and all this stuff, like all this craziness that you just can visualize, just always moving, and you see that trippiness in his art. And he also there's resemblance to, because you brought up Stargates earlier, resemblance to what looks like wormholes in his works and Stargates. You have arches in his work that, again, what are you hinting at? There's windows that characters go through, and they're coming in and out of these windows of different shapes and sizes. So I do 100% believe you have a lot of different arches and gateways around the world at these ancient megalithic sites, where what is that door there for? What is the purpose of that
those
being?
Victory arches are the biggest one. And I was kind of touching on this briefly with Mark last time I talked to him, is those victory arches, they have a magnetic resonance even today. Okay. Like even today, there's a noticeable resonance there. And then if you look at the tops of the arches, or in any of these old cathedrals,
where they have the rocks that are magnetic,
those H-shaped rocks.
Is that Puma Punku? Right? I think that's how you say it. Let me look it up.
I believe
I have a supercomputer right in front of me, and I'm not even looking.
But ultimately, these doorways, man, were everywhere, right? Like we see these cathedrals and things like this. Maybe not the cathedrals so much. I think there may have been a different thing to those, but definitely like the victory arches. Today it's symbolic to walk through a victory arch after a victory. But what if back, when these things were geared up and functional, you would transport things and people from one place to another, because these arches were all over the place. They're massive too.
Yeah, I've had Brian Forster on the show before, and he's been here quite a few times. He actually lives in, I believe, Peru or Bolivia. And right here you go. Here's an archway that leads to nowhere. Where does this go? Then you have this here. I believe that's Quetzalcoatl, or one of these South American demigods, if you will. And you have these archways everywhere along the world. I mean, they're everywhere. And what were they used for?
The Royal Palace in Switzerland, in Stockholm, Sweden. All right, you can look up pictures of it online. Behind the throne is an archway supported by some pillars, but there's a curtain draped over it. But it's a giant archway, a doorway. So
what's it called?
I mean, it's the Stockholm Royal family. or the Stockholm Royal Throne Room. It'd probably be
Right here. Oh yeah, right
yes. So see behind that curtain there, you got this archway, right? And if you are able to look up, like find another picture where it looks above the throne, like there's a second tier to it all,
there.
and
Up here.
like yeah. See, it looks like they have the windows open at this one, but it looked to me like there's more behind that. And if that is a wall, what's the point there? You know, if there's a wall right behind that, like there's on both of the other sides, or at one time was this all kind of open? Oh man, old architecture fascinates me. Just it's mind blowing, especially when you see like the kind of hidden fractal essence of everything. The sacred geometry is just amazing.
Let's get into your Cymatics star theory thing. I want to hear about that. Then we can talk about some Tartaria, because that's what I really wanted to talk to you about.
For sure,
Tartaria.
for sure. Yeah, it's crazy. That's what got me into all of this madness is kind of Tartaria, a little bit of flat Earth there at first. But so cymatics, you know, the study of sound and its kind of ability to manipulate matter, right? Most people are familiar with if you have a speaker and you set some sand on it or some water and you play a certain tone, it'll create shapes, right? But there's a lesser known kind of fact about sound is if you have a bubble kind of suspended, and I wish I had pulled up and thought to pull up the YouTube video on this. If you have bubbles suspended in a solution, like a liquid of a certain type, I forget exactly what it is, and then you send a certain sonic frequency through this bubble of air or of gas, what happens is it heats up and it actually glows, okay? And the temperature reading from within these tiny, tiny bubbles that are being hit with sound and being, you know, made to glow, to vibrate fast enough, that matter in there, to where it just lights up like an LED light. And it's apparently as hot as we are told stars are, but very small, just a small little bubble. And this is kind of, for most people, kind of a stretch. But if you think about creation stories, right, the division of the waters is a kind of a big thing in almost all creation myths. There's, you know, an ocean of nothing,
Adam
or
and
the void.
Eve. It comes from man.
I mean, yeah. So you have the separation of the waters was like on the second day or something. So just going with that kind of school of thought of the waters above, the waters below. There's also more than that makes me able to suggest that there is a type of liquid above us. Now, what type of liquid it is, I couldn't tell you, but it may very well be just, like I was saying, a different octave of our water, basically, like kind of layers starting over again up above us. So maybe it's not so much a purposeful barrier, like to keep us in. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, firmament, you mean to keep us in and keep us from like escaping because this is a prison?
I
like,
think
no,
so,
maybe
bro.
not so much that, but maybe you know, the ice wall in Antarctica might be our barrier, or that's why there are so many, you know, government agencies that won't let you go down there, and
they
stuff
meet down there too, bro.
Right, they love to go party down there with the aliens or the Pleiadians or
Reptilians.
whatever it is they're doing, you know. But so, you know, think about if there's just another layer above us, like if it's infinite layers of realities kind of layered in on each other, mirrored in and out and in and out forever, like fractal universe, right? Most people that have, you know, indulged in some mushrooms might understand kind of the feeling of what I'm saying, but apply that to a very material sense, and you might have this kind of layering of dimensions. So that being said, this substance above, right, may very well just be kind of the bottom floor of a different octave of existence. Just like when you go down to the bottom of the ocean here and you find these layers of an even heavier water, right, that's sitting in below that water, and they'll try to drive the submersible down into it, and it won't.
Yeah, you've seen that? That's crazy.
It won't go down, and it won't. Yeah, it just kind of bounces off of it, much like when you see these rockets shoot up, these SpaceX rockets, and they seem to smack into something shortly after they detach their second, you know, their secondary booster. It flies off this way, and then you have it kind of slide across the sky, and put out, it looks like rooster tail, like when you watch a boat race or, you know, something like that. So there's a very kind of aquatic feel to this space, you know, above us, as opposed to a void.
Very malleable, if you will, like
right.
waves
a
in the
tangible
ocean.
space, not a void, not an empty, untangible space. But I think that's why they refer to it as dark matter. You know, they admit, you know, that more than half of the universe, probably closer to 80 or 70% of the universe is made of dark matter. But
which we don't know what the fuck it is. Yeah,
they just refuse to address like that situation. It has energetic mass, maybe not mass like we're used to, and matter in our octave, you know, of existence. We've got matter, and that's the say all and be all of substance, right? Outside of matter, it's not substance, it's not real. That's our mindset. That's how we're taught to approach all of this stuff. It's like, doesn't exist, it's just in the movies. Or if it's something we don't understand, like these waters above or this next octave, why not call it the vacuum of space, so that people don't want to go and check it out, right?
Yeah, and some people don't subscribe to the idea, because I love the Gnostics, right? Early Christianity was crazy and just psychedelic, and a lot of people don't like the idea of, right, the darker aspect that the demiurge has trapped us through cymatics, right? The whole Saturn time cube thing, where Saturn, the demiurge, is shooting down these beams, creating reality, because we know cymatics and sounds and frequencies can manipulate matter. So have you heard the frequencies coming from outer space? They're crazy. They're wild. The frequencies coming off of Venus and Saturn are crazy.
Off of everything, man.
Off of everything.
Even out of, like, you stick a couple of electrodes in a mushroom, man, and you get their musical energy, which is very, very similar to the stuff we're getting from space. Right, like it has the same kind of chirpiness to it, and
I think that we are a failed plant experiment. The mushrooms put us here to spread their spores and to procreate, and I think we just got out of hand for them. Because if you think about it, bro, you can't ever find anything in the world that has the range of a mushroom. This one can kill you, and this one can turn you into Bigfoot if you take enough of it. And this one in the center tastes amazing. So there's this crazy range when it comes to fungi, and we know it's everywhere. The plants communicate with it. It's this network. It's a living, breathing thing. And here we are trying to find out what's on the moon or what's on planet Saturn. What do we need a space force for? You know what I mean? Like all this stuff. Like what? Let's. I did an episode with Kyle from the Big Dumb Podcast and my homies at Illuminati Confirmed, where I said, why are we so focused on finding what's out there when on this world that we're on, there's things in the bottom of our oceans that are super psychedelic. Like if you look at a manta ray while you're on mushrooms, it's an alien,
dude,
bro.
That photo, the bioluminescence in the deep parts of the ocean, or even in the shallows, right? These bioluminescent kind of little microscopic creatures. Dude, I've gone swimming in the ocean at night and had just the whole water light up underneath. Magical, absolutely nuts. So this is, like, why don't I always wondered that. All right, after Jacques Cousteau, there was nobody for that field. All they started saying was everything's dead, fuck it, you know. There was nobody to investigate. Man, I used to love looking at Jacques Cousteau's books.
What does he talk about? I'm not familiar with his work.
Just all deep sea creatures, these abyssal animals, the anglerfish with the little light that hangs down,
the goblin shark.
Yeah. So I mean, and then after him, nobody else did that except James Cameron, you know, who went down to the Titanic. God only knows.
That's the guy from Avatar, right?
Yeah. He likes to go down there and look at Titanic.
Well, I'm a fan of Avatar, and for the new one is coming out very soon, Avatar 2.
Oh, man.
And supposedly he made this crazy underwater technology for the filmings of their underwater scenes. So you have a guy who wants to
he's all about submersibles. Dude, this guy's nuts. Like, I wish I had that kind of money to be able to go out there for like couple million a day and, you know, to go drop a submarine into the ocean and go. So he's probably the only person amongst anybody outside of like the sciences that has even looked at any of this stuff or, you know, had the ability and the drive to do this. And I think that that's part of why we're all kind of kept in an economic despair, because people are genuinely curious, you know, about the deep sea or the skies or space. but you can't fly because FAA will ground you, right?
You mentioned
the guy with the lawn chair balloons who took off near an airport found that out real quick. Like, so you're not allowed to do any of that really awesome stuff that we would all love to do. We'd all love to go down in a submersible under the ocean, but it's like freaking couple million a day to go out there and do something like that.
And you mentioned cathedrals at the beginning of the podcast, right? Where again, it ties into Tartaria. I recently learned that I believe it was either we were doing an episode on Falconelli and the mystery of the cathedrals. I believe it was.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I've been searching for somebody to kind of speak on that with.
Well, here's the thing. I recently learned that in these cathedrals, right, talking about other dimensions, cymatics and stuff, people experienced time, sound, colors differently in these ancient cathedrals. And we have, again, they're all over the world, which ties into Tartaria of what they were doing, how they were doing things. But I found it so psychedelic that you're able to push a certain religion, bro. If you're pushing, X religion, Christianity or Catholicism, and you bring people inside this and they're doing the Eucharist or some ceremony or some hymns or whatever, they see it differently and hear it differently than they would on the outside world, they would think it's true.
You got them, dude.
Exactly.
100%. I mean, it's an expanded kind of awareness and a very susceptible, vulnerable state that you put people into by putting them into a different octave real quick, get them vibing a little bit differently and put them in there and then preach to them. Yeah, you're going to speak to their soul, like almost directly. And I think that that these cathedrals, a lot of them, if you look at, why am I drawing such a blank right now? All right, if you look at
a cathedral?
Yeah, no, the guy that wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I don't know his name, but I can look it up.
But yeah, so anyway, you look at this guy and he talks about, the Hunchback being, well, maybe he doesn't talk about it, but there's thoughts.
Victor Hugo?
Victor Hugo, yes. I recommend anybody go take a look at his work for some kind of insight on this transition that happened that led us to where we are today. So there's the Hunchback. He lives in one of these bell towers, right? Mm-hmm. He's obsessed with these bells and maintaining these bells and, keeping the church bells ringing, the cathedral tower bells ringing. And he's also, a hunchback, but he's a very large character. And so that's interesting. He also, from most points of view, has red hair, if I'm not mistaken. So that kind of speaks to the...
You saying he's a Tartarian, bro? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Hey, man.
What are you talking about, bro? You're talking my language now.
He's about the last one, dude. And so that's why he's belittled, right? That's why he's put down in his place. That's why they talk about him like he's a freak, dude. He's probably a beautiful, tall, man with lush, long red hair and, the redheaded giants that were taught were evil, right? In Native American lore, these redheaded giants are evil monsters, right? Cannibals and so on and so forth. And looking at Tartaria and the scale of these buildings, cathedrals included. Most old world buildings, the scale is insane. You walk up to one of these front doors, sometimes you're half the size, sometimes you're like a tenth of the size of these giant doors. And we're all like, oh yeah, it's for, it was fashionable at the time, I think is what we say about it.
It was that, what was it? That they were making so much money from the gold rush that they needed to put the money somewhere. So they started building all these crazy architectures and like, come on, bro. Come on.
Yeah. All within, 75 years across the world, 100 years around the world, because we're pretty much taught nothing from before the War of 1812. We're not taught a whole lot about the Civil War. I've got my own theories on the Civil War. I guess it kind of could tie into Tartaria in the sense that Tartaria was one state over here in Russia, right? You had Tartaria. And I think that calling the entire old world Tartaria kind of sucks because we've lost the verbiage to deal with it because we're currently sitting in the United States. So for us to look at the past and think that there was even more massive United States that spanned most of the world, right, is kind of a foreign thought. It's like, no, USA is the first, right? We got that pride, that American pride that's like, no, we're the US of A, number one, A number one, right? So we've got that going on. And we've got these founding fathers who are, there's tons of information out there to suggest that they were practicing
Lizards.
in the occult.
Mm-hmm.
They were right. They were deceivers to a certain extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were shape-shifting. They were portraying a picture of who we see they are today is the portrayal they wanted to extend.
100%. Yeah.
And so for them to extend that portrayal, how do you sit in a small hall in the middle of summer on the East Coast where it's freaking blazing hot? You sit there and you brainstorm? You brainstorm for what, 4 days, 2 weeks, whatever they tell us in school that they
were
meditating,
came up with, bro. It was a ritual.
Right. Or they could have been doing that, but also could they have had this information prior to like the Constitution, right? Like you notice there's a lot of amendments to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution by itself, man, offers us a beautiful existence, just beautiful, and then you've got all these amendments that start specifying so on and so forth. Okay, well, we're not going to do this and we're going to do this now. So there's all these amendments, which is interesting in itself. But then you have the Bill of Rights, right? Like, so you have these things we feel like we derive our freedom from these documents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if this is, kind of speculation because it's just based on an idea. What if there was a civilization before that we've come to call Tartaria that was really the United States? Okay. This spanned, like I said, most of the entire globe. You had kingdoms, you can call them kingdoms. City-states is what they told us they were when we were in school, right? Greek city-states, Italian city-states, Roman city-states. They tell us of these dense pockets of population, right? That essentially had a governor, right? That's under Roman rule, where they had the governor that reported then, to Caesar. So they've told us what the structure of the past looks like in a loose kind of sense. These city-states, these pockets of civilization. Okay, but if you take it a step further, knowing that, the victors always write the history books.
His story. Yep.
Right. So you take that into account and think about the other side of the people that were in the War of 1812, the American Civil War. What was really going on there, I don't think we'll ever know, but it's definitely a lot of push for us to think and feel a certain way about all of these wars. They almost don't even mention the War of 1812. They only mention Napoleon for the most part, and I think that that's on purpose. It's a historical figurehead for us to focus on him being a small statured person, having an attitude, blah, blah, blah. So we got all these little distractions in our way when we try to look into this stuff. So I'm suggesting actively, as a matter of fact, it seems that the United States was a worldwide kind of phenomenon, and that this civilization may have been cohabitated by more than one kind of group of people. So we had these larger people, and then we had just what we would consider, regular people like you and I. I'm not sure how tall you are, but I'd imagine you're within like a foot. So, you know what I mean? We had a substantially different grade of variety of peoples back in this time. I mean, there's reference in Native American kind of legend and lore that there was a war with these red-headed giants, right? They call them monsters, they call them evil, they call them cannibals and things like this. And that's fine. That could have been their opinion. But, imagine if you're a red-headed giant with a red-headed giant family, and you know what I mean? You're caretaking this cathedral, or you know what I mean? This city-state of your own, maybe called Chilaga, right? And it's right where kind of Chicago now stands. And you're holding your ground, and these people come over, these little people, lots of them, and you haven't seen them in like, a couple hundred years because whatever cataclysm happened kind of screwed things up for everybody. And so, people have been kind of sparse, but then all of a sudden you got this flood of people coming around the lands where you've been chilling for maybe a few hundred years, who knows how long. And you've got your city state there in Chicago, also back in that day would have been called Chilaga. I mean, even the Chicago Tribune kind of has an article. If you go type in Chilaga to your DuckDuckGo bar, you will find this article from the Chicago Tribune kind
I
of
wanted to
talking
bring this
about.
up because I think Abraham Lincoln might have been a Tartarian, right? He was so tall for his time. He was 6'4", towered over all the other candidates and all this stuff.
It may very well have been. And, if you know anything about the way that the power system does things, they will often usurp a certain line of people.
What'd you say to type in?
Convince some of those people, Chilaga with an 8 at the end there. And then
Tribune?
Yeah. Well, of course it doesn't want to pull up.
But check this building out, bro. I mean...
Yeah. So yeah, and it's everywhere, and none of the stories make sense. None of the, like, if you go to look into these architects, right? Say you find the name of that architect to that building, and you go look into it, you might have like a couple paragraphs on this person, right? But look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
That work there, right?
Sold for $240 million back in.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the article that they were talking about Chilaga as the mythical kind of like old world city that was like, just a beautiful like city of gold type thing, right? And like it was a Spanish myth basically, that in the lands right around where Chicago is was a city called Chilaga, and had beautiful and was golden and all of this, the golden city of Chilaga. And it's on maps from the 1500s.
And it's where Chicago
Chilaga
is right now?
Yeah. So let me see if I have.
Yeah, ain't nothing pulling up for me, bro. But I mean,
that's weird. That's really crazy. But yeah, let me see if I can.
Well, wasn't this where they had the Chicago World Fair too? I mean, that's one of the main things.
So it would sit right there, right? Exactly. It would sit right where that white city is, right where all of that stuff, thrown out there. So look at that, and then look at the scale of all of these buildings in the white city there at the World's Fair in Chicago. Okay.
Well, we have El Dorado, and I pulled up the Golden City Chilaga myth. We have El Dorado, but I'm pretty sure that's not by Chicago.
No, it's most likely, to be quite honest, most of the cities in what's now known as the United States may very well have been these old school, golden, just beautiful cities like this, right? Like this insane architecture.
You show this to somebody, bro, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's like Italy or France or something." It's like,
right,
no,
and this was everywhere. Venice, California used to look like Venice, Italy, back before they started renovating and stuff. So look at the scale of everything.
Look at that.
The scale of all of that does not make sense, let alone somehow they cast all that concrete and stuff with horses and buggies.
Yeah. And then they tore it all down. 98% of it got torn down.
Yeah, and what didn't get torn down, a cow knocked over a candle and burned down the entire city. So, I mean, they're not even trying, dude. They're not even trying. But look at that portal doorway, right?
Yeah.
And if you're hip to mud flood, imagine if that doorway extends all the way down to the bottom. Imagine how huge these places are.
And then the lights too was another one. The lighting.
Yeah, right at the very beginning of electricity, they pulled this off worldwide, mind you, like year after year for something like 15 or 20 years.
This is wild to me, bro. I love this theory, but then you bring it up to some people and it's like flat Earth. They don't want to accept it. Like, oh well, where's your proof? I go, what do you mean, bro? Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah, exactly. And see, going kind of back to Cymatics, in each of these towers back when they were originally in use, there would have most likely been a set of bells, massive bells. Okay. So these bells would chime, maybe not just to chime the time, but maybe to provide what we've come to realize very recently as sonic healing. This is a practice starting to take off in medicine, in real life, with real provable shit for people. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you can prove that you can go to a practitioner and they can use sound therapy on you to heal you. It's everywhere. See, the ones in the Californias look a little bit more kind of Moorish, though. You see the shapes of the roof are a little bit more kind of tapered. I mean, look at the Iowa State House. I live in Iowa, dude. I go and check this thing out all the time. It looks just like one of these buildings. Unbelievable. And these are in every state, dude.
Whoa.
There's one like this. And that's a gold dome on there. So think about these cities spread out everywhere. Imagine if they all had these gold and copper domes. Tell me that wouldn't look like a city of gold to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, bro. And this is something that this is, the world fairs. What a lot of people don't know is that like how you said, they were everywhere. They were all over the world. And the late 1800s, early 1900s is such a psychedelic time in history, because you have Nikola Tesla in there, you have Crowley in there too, you have all these figures of throughout history who were innovators, right? Who pushed forward these ideas. You have Edison, you have Westinghouse, you have J.P. Morgan, you have all the lizards except for Nikola Tesla.
Well, I think what's interesting is once you're open to this kind of rabbit hole of, wait a minute, how in the hell did we build that, right? Like, and there are no pictures of that Iowa State House any more than half built. Like, it was about 3/4 built. It looked wrecked to me. It looked burnt and kind of messed up. And they're trying to say that picture is while they were building it. It didn't make sense to me. The color gradients in the stone, things like that. Maybe I'm, just crazy, but maybe I have a keen eye for the stuff that just doesn't fit. After a little while, you start to recognize the patterns a little bit.
Talk about the Star Fort. So I found this place, right? Because I have a house down in Miami, and this is a Fort Jefferson here in Florida. I'm from Florida. And when I looked this place up, because we have St. Augustine as well, that has the same sort of structure.
Right in the middle of the ocean.
Dude, this is literally, you need a boat to get to it. And it's the craziest thing. Let's look it up here so I looked it up and I told my wife, I was like, hey, I want to go here one day because this looks like a star fort from Tartaria. And she doesn't know what the fuck that is. So of course she's like, what are you talking about? But this place here, dude, it is literally
unbelievable. And that's more than 16 million bricks, right?
Yes.
Like they just took these out here to the middle of the ocean for what? What do you I mean, if you have cannons out there, I guess that would be useful, but
look at where it's at, bro.
Look at where it's at. Yeah.
What are you doing out here?
It's not defending any kind of a harbor or anything, dude.
What are you doing? Look at this. This is at the end of the Keys, and then boom, right here. Look at this.
Yeah.
This is wild, bro.
Like, even if you don't think mud flood happened, there's water covering up what maybe used to be exposed, right? So if the water level rises, the whole water table kind of rises on the entire planet somehow. Some will think that it's the heavens, the gates of the heavens opened and the waters above came in. Maybe, who knows? But I mean, these things were not, I guess what I'm trying to say is they were not out in the middle of the ocean alone like that hundreds of years ago. They would have been connected to a causeway, which you can kind of see the remnants of, there. But nuts. And dude, every state has a state house that's equally, if not more magnificent.
Check this out, bro. This is my favorite right here. When they were transporting them via barges.
Yes.
See, this guy's a Freemason. Look at that right there. Let's see here. Yeah, but look at this. How beautiful is that? And they just tore it all down. There's only 2 or 3 buildings left from this, and this spanned for I don't know how many. I think 6 or 7 miles. I believe it was that this spanned. Bro.
It was something. I think the one in San Francisco was 700 acres, something like that, and the one in Chicago was bigger, and then the one in Paris was even
Tennessee.
bigger.
Look at this. A pyramid. They have a pyramid. They have a pantheon looking thing
in
there,
Memphis.
dude.
In Memphis. And Memphis is, if you know about Egypt, you know that there's a Memphis, Egypt also.
Oh,
it's very, very suggestive that the U.S., the America that we now understand, was more than likely the quote unquote biblical Egypt. Okay, because it lines up better when you start taking those tales and, you start looking at the landmarks, the land masses, things like Mount Sinai most likely not being, out by Mount Ararat in Egypt, but it talking about the landscape differently and everything else within these old texts. So that's just, one of the thoughts. But then if you look at our dollar bill, right? Look at the all-seeing eye there. Look at the obelisk in Washington. Look at these pillars in every single state. Like next to the State House, there's a pillar with the, I don't know what goddess it is. It might be suggestive of Mithra. Kind of like the Statue of Liberty, but there's always this goddess perched atop this pillar. And I mean, ask Mark, he'll tell you they're in Connecticut. They've got these massive pillars with the statues on top. They're always gold or bronze. And So, I mean, these people are kind of rubbing in our faces that they are Rome. Okay. Like Rome didn't die off. You know what I mean? Rome just took over, rebranded itself into the corporatocracy. You know what I mean? That's why they call it the Club of Rome and all that. So basically, like what we consider Egypt, they've set aside a little piece of land out in the Middle East to have us focus our attention and say, hey, this is Egypt right here within these borders. So whenever you see any reference or hear of anything having to do with Egypt or, the 6 Alexandrias over there or any of that stuff, you look here. You don't think about anything else anywhere in the world, but just right here where we tell you to focus your attention to. Instead
and
of
therefore
looking
it becomes true by focusing all the
100%,
thoughts
yeah,
on borders that they put there, like borders that they built, these lines that they put there that nobody
you were
else
talking
put.
about social constructs the other day, and it's right on with that. This is the mechanism that they've used to expand their borders so exponentially that they have taken over what I consider that used to be the United States, essentially, of the world. These were free people that stood for their own rights. They had the Constitution that kind of essentially mirrors ours. And that's where I feel these concepts and ideas kind of shone through. And then the Club of Rome comes over through certain societies, secret and not secret, corporations, the East India Company. I mean, you name it, dude. Like they built this mechanism for not just conquering, but ruling and kind of dominating, like all in the same thing, but they call it different things. They call it corporations, and then they call it government, right? What does government mean? It means govern your mind. So, that's all the government's job is to convince you of something. That's it. Like convince you pay taxes, and you do pay taxes. Convince
simulacrum. Money's fake. Everything is fake, and it's how David Icke says. It's one thing being in a prison where you can touch and feel the bars, and there's another thing being in a prison where you can't see the bars, right? It's all the same thing essentially, but that's what they've. A lot of people, dude. They just subscribe to these ideas. They blindly follow them. Why? Because so and so said so. Well, what makes the president, bro? Because a bunch of people said that they came together.
And take an experimental procedure for what? Come on, you need to show me more than just a Newsweek saying it's okay to. Like that's mind blowing to me that got as far as it did, or that any of it really does. But it speaks to the power of persuasion. And the art that these wizards are actually casting these spells on us. It is an art, you can consider it a dark art, but it is an art nonetheless.
Well, let's, you're talking about cymatics, you're talking about frequencies and all that. That's why Plato's The Republic, where he talked about the effects sound and the arts had on a people. So he wanted to limit the instruments that they use, the arts that they practice, because it spoke to people's souls, whatever that is. But he even understood this. And you're talking about a piece of work that the Nazis took and even Martin Luther King Jr. took. And those are two polar opposites groups of people and the movements that they led, but took the same piece of work and interpreted it completely different. So again, back to I said on a podcast one time, I said that the magician stage just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The more resources that they have at their disposal, they're going to make all these movies like The Matrix or Fight Club, which if you notice, they haven't made any movies as cerebral as those movies. It was like a different time, right?
It was before everyone started waking up, man. So they were pushing the envelope to get their karmic balance. And like even the new Matrix was
it's garbage.
It was dialed in with their agenda of transhuman and transgenderism. Bro. Also, it was like, no, now they're getting along with the machines. It's all good. It's cool. It's all good.
But then you have people like Elon Musk, bro, that I don't even know where I stand with them, because it's like, I'm a big Elon Musk fan. You think that he's for the people, but then he wants to hook you up to Neuralink. So it's like, what are you trying to do, bro? You're talking about summoning the demon when you talk about AI, but then you want to plug us in. What's your deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. And you know what the deal with him is it's just, dude, he's playing. We're all actors, man. We are all come down
Truman
here.
Show.
We've all come down here to play a character. Maybe I chose to be who I am today, which is, not a power player. Maybe you chose to be who you were, before you kind of came down and were born. Maybe we all choose, right? And we all have roles, and maybe it's like Total Recall, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You go and you sit down, you're like, I want to be a secret agent, and then like you're a secret agent. But you don't start out as a secret agent. You're born and you live through the childhood of that secret agent. And you know what I mean? You go to high school that secret agent went to, and then later you become a secret agent or whatever it is.
Friedrich Nietzsche, he talked about the eternal recurrence, where it was pretty much like life is a DVD, is like that True Detective show where everything that is about to happen has already happened, and you will repeat it for eternity, always and always and always. And life is like a DVD, because when you play a DVD back over, the same things happen over and over and over again. And people don't change their lines. People don't change what they do. It's the same thing over and over again. But step back. Who's watching that DVD? Who's playing that DVD?
Right,
who's fucking around with the DVD player?
In my opinion, it's your higher self. It's your oversoul. The unified you, right? That may very well contain all of us here, right? So when you start thinking about other dimensions, not only is the experience of a different dimension going to be kind of different than on our octave, but just the way that information is collected, like I was saying earlier about the senses and perspective. So all that's going to shift and become something we cannot even fathom, down here in little old Earth. But so the cymatic kind of qualities that are just striking are the quality of the ability for sound to vibrate something and resonate it so that it glows, you know what I mean, within a bubble. Like, that's mind-blowing to me. So just imagine if there was this song, right? This song being sung
the music of the spheres, bro.
Right. So, and I mean, you look at Genesis stories, right? It doesn't matter, origin stories for anything, Lord of the Rings included, right? You look at these stories and it always starts with what? The word, right? So that's inferring vibration,
sound,
that's inferring sound. So coming through with that word, that sound, that music, like very much like it is in the Lord of the Rings origin stories, it's a symphony. Okay. And we have these signals, these different phenomena coming from space, and we can record to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
We capture them through the Hubble telescope. Whether it's sitting up there on a Mercury vortex engine hovering or not is up to NASA. I don't really know, but may very well be. That's my opinion. Or either that or they suction cupped it to the top of whatever this is.
A GoPro, dude. A GoPro.
Yeah, dude, that's all it is, dude. It's just a GoPro stuck up to the firmament up there. But yeah, so just the quality of sound to do all of this, man. It almost looks like light is a form of sound. If you're kind of with the school of thought of different wavelengths, fractal existence, you have light, sound. They're two different sets of the same kind of thing, and you have matter, which is a denser kind of sense, right? So you got like matter, and then you have sound, and then you have light, which is also sound. And then above that, you will have a different type of sound, a different octave rather. So you've got this kind of octave layering. Much like density layers, you drop a heavy stone into water, it sinks.
Mm-hmm.
You drop a balloon into water, it floats. So you kind of have this law of density. If you want to call it gravity, whatever. I'm mad at you. But so if there's that density gradient here, why wouldn't we just have one, what we consider above or below, or very well right here, right now, next to us in the unseen realm? In a different density is an entire other existence going on
100%,
that we just can't
bro.
see.
I believe that.
So absolutely. So some people call it spirit realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it, aliens even can be lumped right in with spirit realm and cymatic kind of energetic things. There's a lot of suggestion that like Pleiadians and these different space people have light bodies, right? So that's kind of, it's like a different phrasing for angels. It's angels isn't as popular nowadays. So they're like, okay, so how do we portray this to people? Oh, okay, everyone's cool with aliens. All right, let's go with that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just speaking to the sheep in the group. That's like what all of this whole system and everything's for. But getting kind of back to Tartaria, there's some interesting things about what happened, like what fell this civilization, right? Like, did these people that are in charge now, did they create some kind of a cataclysm that kind of created this mud flood and this dust bowl, these like sandstorms?
It was global warming, bro.
Well, and they're exactly, why not? Or global cooling, who knows?
Yeah.
Global weirding. There you go.
Yeah.
That was the one that we were going with for a while there. Hey, global weirding's at it again. I definitely think that's right. So, yeah, you've got this thing that happens, right? We're pretty much not told about it. There's suggestions in the Bible about the end of days, right? Before the tribulations, where this comet comes and wipes out a third of the ocean, turns a third of the ocean to blood or whatever, and like does all this crazy stuff, upturns mountains, right? Like just flips the ground over. So was this a pole shift? Was this, if there are poles, that is, I know there's tons of flat earthers out
constantly
there.
Constantly shifting too. That was another thing.
Yeah, it's moving. So it's just a magnetic, vibration. It's just the resonance is changing always. Just like we are all individually in our own selves changing resonance. Everything that we learn, everything that we do, we're changing our vibration throughout our life. So like what we see happening on the outside is also going on like within us. It's crazy, man.
As above, so below, bro.
As within, so without, certainly. And it's all part of this fractal design, and it's in all aspects. So you can't just look at it as material things above and below. You can look at it as, like, oddly enough, spiritually and emotional things within, so without. So like, as you start looking at yourself and chewing through your own skeletons in your closet, throwing them out, getting over stuff, you'll start to see that you meet people that are also over their shit. So it works that way. It's a fractal existence. That's part of the like hidden meaning of fractals. Is it's not just a visual design, it's not just a mandala that you see when you're on LSD. It's not any of these specific little things that it also is a representation of, but it's not any one of those things. So what happened to the vibration here, that the resonance that screwed everything up and like created this mud, or this just mass cataclysm? Because if you look at some really old pictures of pretty much everywhere in the world, there's always these old ruins, right? Like everywhere. And they're massive old ruins. You got Easter Island, these massive heads, and they're buried. Yeah. They were buried like halfway up, up to like here. They've got whole bodies underneath their heads. You know what I mean? So where did all that mud and stuff come from? There's kind of a line of thinking that I think is pretty legit and makes the most sense to me. And that is that if you look at from satellite images, I won't say space, I don't want to offend people, but from satellite images, if you look at rivers and you look at an electrical scar, like if you put water on top of a piece of wood and electroshock it, it creates this fractaling branch.
Like look at Mars, bro. The same thing with Mars, where
so yeah, you see this it looks like a lightning bolt, right? Like running across the ground, very much the same as if we do it in a lab. That's what happens. So we see some areas of the world like Bryce Canyon in Utah. We see the Grand Canyon. We see, like, look at the mountains of China. How the hell did any of that happen? You know what I mean? So we see lots of crazy things with land masses around the world that we're kind of told, oh, well, that was just the ground underneath pushing up. You know what I mean? Which may very well have happened.
Beautiful.
But like in China, those mountains just don't make sense, man. It's nuts. How did that happen? Unless it was something very violent, right?
Rainbow Mountains too. That's crazy.
Rainbow Mountains. There's a lot of folks out there that have been looking into mining, hydraulic mining in particular, and things like that. I'm gonna start getting into that real soon. That's a rabbit hole in itself. That perhaps these larger people that were here before, and maybe even the larger people above them, remember, thinking fractals now, fractals in scale also, as well as realities and things like this. So, imagine if now those larger people, they're not here for whatever reason. Did they die off? Did they move on? Who knows? We're never going to find out. There's some evidence that there were giant people, but the Smithsonian's, swept all that under the rug. So we won't touch that this episode. But like, as far as mining goes, like, look at those deposits in straight lines, right? across that entire valley. And they're all different layers of different materials. So it's just nuts. And if you look at modern mining operations, you'll start to see the kind of resemblance in some of these like piles of, mine waste.
Yeah. Yeah, here in Florida, bro.
So, was that cataclysm all mining out of the world? What did that look like? How did this happen? Was there a giant spaceship that came down and just electrozapped the shit out of the Grand Canyon? Or was there, like the Indian Vedic texts? This is my favorite kind of way to look at it. Like the Vedic texts, was there a war in the skies between these flying cities, right? Flying cities, Vimanas. These things, they had technology where in the Vimana, they could see what was going on in the other Vimana. So that's exactly what you and I are doing right now. And this is written, supposedly thousands and thousands of years ago.
What the fuck, bro? Hold on. I gotta hit it.
What the fuck? Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah, bro. This shit blows my mind, dude. Because, these ancient scriptures that they talk about all these things, it's like we can't ignore that. We can't ignore the fact that they were talking about all this craziness about these. And you got the movies like Transformers.
Written in Sanskrit, a perfected language.
Yes.
Joseph Selby was kind enough to share with me the other day that was the biggest part to him. And he wrote the book on the time cycles called the Yugas. So, I mean, in these ancient texts, man, there's suggestion to all of the answers to all the questions we all have. What happened? How was it back then? Based on these texts, 12,000 years ago, magic would have actually been a thing. You would have been able to manifest things by essentially chanting something. That's what's suggested in these ancient texts. And based on what we see in like old etchings, this is another thing I want to talk to you about is some old etchings, man. You can't find pictures earlier than like the 1800s. But what you do find is renderings, right? Like these artist renderings, but they're etched. So they have a very specific kind of penciled in kind of look to them. But they're very detailed, very detailed. And you can find them from as far back as like the 1500s, I think is right about the earliest they go. There's really not too much before, supposedly Columbus landed out here. There's not a lot of stuff from the 1400s. Michelle Gibson puts it very interestingly that perhaps this control structure didn't actually take hold until about the 1500s. And that's when everything started getting rewritten and destroyed and blah, blah, blah. But back to the aliens flying Vimanas and zapping the world with laser beams or whatever. Was it that? Or was there some kind of plasma event, right? We're coming to find out more and more that the sun may very well be a type of plasma. They have plasma reactors. The Sapphire reactor is one of them. I think they have it up in Canada where this thing behaves exactly like the sun. It's a self-organizing ball of plasma that looks exactly the same as the sun does up close.
That they've modeled, that they've done under tests as well. That the Chinese they made a sun. Did you hear about that? They made like an artificial sun.
It's wild, dude. Wild. I wonder what that's all about. But so like, imagine that the sun is part of an electric circuit. I don't think that's a far cry for most people at this point, realizing that, man, just based on the angle of light coming through clouds, if you can't figure out the sun's a lot closer than we're told, I don't know what to tell you, at least based on observation. Again, back to observation, because, we each have our own. So.
Yeah, no, 100%, bro. And you're starting to get into electric universe theory, which I would love to have you back on for that because I'm kind of running low on time right now. I got another.
No worries, dude. Yeah, it all ties in, man. And that's why I started Red Thread Podcast, man, to try to figure out all this. And the more I learn, dude, the more I realize I don't know nothing, nothing at all.
It's definitely a rabbit hole, bro.
It's always awesome to chat with everybody about all of this stuff because. Dude, it's just all of the unseen, the esoteric. It's so incredibly interesting. Like, I love it. I haven't been bored a single day since I started looking into Tartaria, especially. Yeah. But so yeah, man, may well have been an electric kind of event that just, look at the Grand Canyons. Look how deep they are, right? Look at how wide they are. Where did all that dirt go? Like, really?
Yeah, where'd it go? And I say we do another episode, bro, on just straight electric universe theory, and we set that up and
Absolutely.
and dive down
That
that
sounds great,
wormhole,
dude.
because I love that. I love that idea. And, again, that's what the gods were to the ancients, that they were being portrayed as plasma in the sky and all this stuff. That's how you get these epics.
Right. It's a personalization
Mm-hmm.
of something beyond our explanation, you know?
Yeah, Randy.
So how else to categorize it? Yeah, for sure, dude. Hey, thanks for getting with me tonight, dude. I really appreciate it. It was an amazing conversation. I love it.
Well, I'll have you back on soon. We'll set that up. And yeah, that was something. Can you let the listeners know where they can find your work?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Random Randy. I'm in the Red Thread podcast, so you can just look up Red Thread podcast everywhere except for Apple. I'll get on Apple soon enough, though. That's all right. And you can look me up on Instagram at Random Fracts. So I appreciate you once again, Juan. And go ahead and shout out your podcast too, so for my audio.
It's at the Juan on Juan podcast. Find me anywhere on social media, the Juan on Juan podcast, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all the good stuff, all the lizard stuff. And yeah, patreon.com/the Juan on Juan podcast. And dude, this was fun, man. A lot of crazy insight, a lot of interesting points, and we got to do this again soon.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks for coming on.
Have a good night.
You too.